Hello, my name is Natalia Galaburda, and this presentation is submitted for 5420 Assignment Activity Unit 4 at the University of the People. Today, I will reflect on a personal experience from my adolescence and connect it to motivational theory to examine how school context influence student achievement motivation. Me briefly to talk through the structure of this presentation so you know what to expect. I have organized it into four main sections. First, I will share a personal reflection, a specific motivational experience from my adolescence in a school setting. And second, I will connect that experience to two major motivational theories from the NTU: self-determination theory and achievement goal theory. Third, I will analyze how specific school-related factors, including classroom climate, teacher expectations, instructional practices, and assessment methods, shaped motivation in my context. And fourth, I will conclude what two evidence-based strategies that I would implement as an educator to better support adolescent achievement motivation. All sources are cited in APA 7th edition and listed on the final slide. Let me begin with the specific classroom context for this reflection. I'm drawing on my experience as a 14 years old student in grade 9 in Sochi, Russia. The subject was history and social studies, a subject I genuinely loved. The classroom had 28 students and was academically competitive. The teacher had been teaching for many years and had a very clear expectation. Students were expected to know the textbook's answers. The instruction was entirely teacher-centered. The teacher would lecture, we would take notes, and at the end of the term, there's one single oral examination where each student had to stand in front of the class and answer the teacher's question from memory. And what made this particularly challenging was the public nature of the assessment. Every student in the class could hear the answers. If you made a mistake, everyone knew. If you said something the teacher did not agree with, you were corrected in front of the peers, and this environment shaped everything about how students engaged with the subject, including me. Now let me describe what happened to my motivation across the school year, because it changed significantly. At the beginning of the year, I was genuinely curious about the history. I was reading beyond the textbook, not because I had to, because I wanted to understand why events happened the way they did. Why did empires collapse? What drives revolutions? This was that Ryan and Dassey would call intrinsic motivation. I was engaged because the subject itself was interesting and meaningful for me, uh, but sometimes shifted as the oral examination approached. I started to realize that my analytical questions, the ones I was most interested in, were not what the teacher valued. When I asked an interpretive question, I was redirected to what the textbook said. When I offered a different perspective, it was treated as incorrect. So I changed my behavior. I stopped asking questions in class. I stopped offering my own interpretations. Instead, I focused entirely on memorizing the correct textbook answers so that I would not make a mistake in front of my classmates during the oral exam. In Eliot and the McGregor's terms, I had shifted from mastery approach goals to performance um, avoidance goals. So I was no longer asking, what can I learn here? I was asking, how do I avoid incompetence in front of everyone? Theory gives us a precise framework for understanding why this shift happened. Ryan and Deci argued that sustained high-quality motivation depends on three basic psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Let me apply each one to my grade 9 classroom. Autonomy, the freedom to learn in personally meaningful ways, was completely absent. We had no choice in what questions to explore, no choice in how to demonstrate our understanding. The textbook's answer was the only acceptable answer. When I learned environment removes all student agency, SDT predicts that motivation will shift from autonomous and intrinsic to control and external, and that is exactly what happened. Competence, the feeling of being capable and effective, was threatened rather than supported. There was no low stake practice before the high stakes oral examination. Students had no opportunity to try, receive feedback, and improve. The first time your performance was evaluated, it happened publicly in front of the entire class. This is exactly the opposite of what SDT recommends for building genuine competence. Relatedness, feeling valued and connected was interesting in my case. I felt socially connected to my classmates, but the public format of the oral exam meant that academic vulnerability was also public. When you made a mistake, your peers saw it. This actually worked against motivation because belonging to the peer group meant protecting yourself from visible failure, which meant avoiding intellectual risk. Achievement goal theory, development by Dweck and later extended by Elliott and McGregor, gives us another layer of explanation. The theory distinguishes between different types of goals students pursue. Mastery goals focus on learning, understanding, and developing competence. Students with mastery goals are motivated by the process of getting better. Performance goals focus on demonstrating ability relative to others, either trying to look competent compared to peers or trying to avoid looking incompetent. When I started grade 9, I had mastery goals. I was reading extra books, I was asking questions, I was genuinely interested in developing my historical understanding. By the middle of the year, I had shifted to performance avoidance goals. I was no longer thinking about what I can learn, I was thinking about what I needed to avoid. I avoided asking questions that might reveal uncertainty. I avoided giving inter- interpretive answers that might be marked as wrong. I choose the safest possible response in every classroom interactions. Dweck calls the classroom environment that produces this shift a fixed mindset environment, one that signals to students that intelligence is something you either have or you don't, and that mistakes are evidence of low ability rather than opportunities for growth. The limitation of achievement goal theory worth nothing is that goal orientation is actually very context sensitive. Research by Leonbrick Garcia and colleagues shows that students can shift between goals orientations even with a single class period. And depending on whether the teacher is watching, whether peers are listening, whether stakes feel high or low. So it is not simply that some students are mastery orientated and others are performance orientated. It depends enormously on the environment that educator creates. Well, looking at the school context through a motivation lens, four factors stand out. Teacher expectations valued accuracy over reasoning. Analytical questions were redirected. Instructions were lecture based with no room for students' inquiry. Assessment was a single oral exam with no formative feedback. And belongings, while socially present, worked against academic risk taking because failure happened publicly. Ames distinguishes mastery and performance motivational climates. A mastery climate values effort at improvement, uses varied tasks, and provides ongoing feedback. A performance climate uses grades and comparison treats mistakes as signs of low ability and relies on summative evaluation. My grade 9 classroom was clearly a performance climate, and the consequence was exactly what AIMS predicts: reduces curiosity and increases disengagement. My first strategy as an educator is to replace single high stakes assessment with a mastery based progression. Instead of one final oral exam, students complete 3 tasks across the term. The first 2 are explicitly upgraded, framed as practice. Written formative feedback is provided before any summative evaluation, and responses are private, not oral, in front of peers to reduce performance avoidance triggers, as the tells us that this restores psychological safety. Achievement goal theory tells us this shifts students toward mastery orientation. My second strategy is to embed structured student choice in inquiry tasks. Instead of one mandatory question which one correct answer, students choose from 2 or 3 inquiry questions that connect to their own experience. Response formats can be flexible: written, visual, or oral, one-to-one with the teacher. As DT tells us, choice supports the autonomy need. Expectancy value theory tells us students engage more when they perceive both value and attainability in a task. And the summary. To summarize, my grade 9 experience shows how a performance climate, single high stakes assessment, and teacher centered instruction systematically undermine adolescents' motivation. SDT and achievement goal theory both explain this pattern, and the 2 strategies are proposed: mastery-based assessment and autonomy-supportive inquiry directly address these structural gaps. This slide lists all references used in this presentation, formatted in APA 7th edition. Sources include Ryan and Dessay, Elliott and McGregor, Dweck, Ames, Wickfield and Eccles, Steinberg, Black and William and Walton and Cohen. All peer-reviewed works directly connected to the motivational theories discussed. Thank you for watching.